Richard Chinn is a teacher-educator based between International House London and King's College London. He has taught English and worked with teachers in a number of contexts around the world, in Asia, Central and South America, Europe, and Africa. He is an experienced tutor on Celta and Delta courses and has worked on PGCE courses as well in the past. Today, we got a chance to meet him in person in Munich and had the possibility to have our podcast in which we talk about his experience and his thoughts about language and language teaching. So let's get going. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Ali.
The first question: how many cups do you need before you start speaking Spanish?
How many drinks? Well, I'm always quite ready to speak Spanish, but I think it gets more fluent if I've had a couple of drinks. It gets less fluent if I've had too many.
This couple, 3 or 4?
Well, 1 or 2, I suppose.
More.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we just finished the workshop.
Yeah.
And for those who didn't come today, I'd like to just give them some information about you. By the way, I watched the workshop in the morning in IATF with Danny, and I like the sequel part, which was there, and today also in the work session.
Yes, that's right.
The sequel part. Yeah. So, just brief description about you, about your experience.
So, I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I've taught a lot in the UK, International House London, but I've also taught in other countries, Costa Rica. Was when I was quite a new teacher, and for example, when I was working in Costa Rica, we didn't have a lot of resources because we were working in the rainforest with Nicaraguan refugees in a community there. So we kind of had to be quite creative with the things that we taught because we didn't have lots of course books and materials. So it was very much working with what the learners needed to say. And when I came back to the UK, I taught ESOL, which is English for Speakers of Other Languages. And in the UK, that specifically means asylum seekers, refugees, migrant workers, and sanctuary seekers. And again, a lot of the course materials that you would normally use in EFL classes wasn't quite right for them. So again, we really had to work on what those particular students needed to be able to function in their daily lives outside the class. So that's kind of what really led me to teaching to what the learners need. And my research, what we talked about today, is the activities we looked at are all loosely based around the idea of working with emergent language in class. An emergent language is language that arises in a lesson that you hadn't planned to teach, but you deal with because the learners need it in some way, or you notice that it's a useful thing that you could look at to push the learners on developmentally. So we looked at that to start with today. We then looked at a type of activities that work with emergent language. We looked at grammar, which is one that teachers, English teachers teach grammar. And we looked at some of the myths around grammar rules. We looked at how actually we've got to help learners process language, help them take a more process approach to language. We talked about taking the noun grammar and turning it into a verb to grammar. To do that, we could get learners to reconstruct texts. So it could be a sentence that we take the grammar out of and then put the grammar back, get the learners to put the grammar back into. Or we looked at activities where we dehydrate the grammar from a text and then the learners rehydrate the text with the grammar that's necessary for that text to be have an accurate meaning. So we looked at that, and then we looked at activities that we can use to push the learners to grammar. So we looked at, for example, a dialogue writing activity where you show the learners a picture and you get them to write a dialogue based on what they think the people in the picture are saying to each other. And then we looked at the kind of feedback as to what teachers we could do. In the second session, we then looked at emergent language more deeply. And then we looked at how you can create space for emergent language in lessons. The first way you can do that is obviously thinking about the questions that the teacher asks, making sure you ask genuine questions, with open-ended questions rather than just yes or no questions, or what we call display questions, when the learners just literally focus on specific language questions. We looked at, when we use texts, how rather than just giving them comprehension questions that are true or false, or WH questions that require scanning, we get them to read a bit more deeply and have an emotional or personal response to the text. And also, thinking about providing questions that require some sort of judgment or assessment, evaluative questions based on a text you're listening or reading. These can push the learner to say more, give their own opinions about the world and their own beliefs. And as a result, that provides the teacher with data that they can use, i.e. emergent language opportunities that they can focus on and look at in feedback. So we looked at those, and then we looked at how we might prepare, brainstorm language to take into class with us. But obviously making sure that we don't just get the learners to, we don't just give that language to the learners, we supply it on demand when the learners need that particular piece of language. So those were the things we looked at today.
Do you have any courses now? Are you teaching any courses?
At the moment, I do. Yeah, I teach quite a few courses. I mainly teach on the MA TESOL program at King's College London. So my students want to be teachers. So it's teacher training course where they do the CELTA course as part of it. I coordinate that bit where they do their teaching practice at International House London. And I also teach academic reading and writing for the undergraduate students on our BA in language and linguistics. So they're the courses that I teach at the moment.
Your students, are they international or just British?
All international, yeah, pretty much. Well, they're mixed. On the BA course, we've got a mixture of students from lots of home students, so students from the UK, but we get a lot of study abroad, like Erasmus students on that programme. So we get quite a few teachers from Germany, actually, from German universities that come and do a study abroad for a term.
What career are they seeking?
To be teachers, generally.
Just teachers.
The students that we have that come from Germany, they're nearly always from, they're studying language pedagogy, and they're coming to do a month of studying at a British university as part of their degree. So, those students definitely want to become teachers. In my experience, the last 6 years I've taught the module rather. And the other students in the MA TESOL, they're generally, I'd say all the students in the last few years that we've had are international students. It seems to be very popular, unfortunately. Yeah.
I want to talk about the lingua franca thing, but a bit later. During the workshop, we were talking about emergent language and also business English. Now, the first question is about business English, something that a lot of my colleagues ask. Okay, we know the general English and stuff like that, but what is business English? Since you're teaching the same, you teach do you teach vocabulary? Yes. Do you teach grammar? Yes. So what's the point of business English? And this question is asked by teachers. Yeah. Some teachers.
I think, again, it depends because, it depends what business it is, because, there is generic business English, how do you negotiate in meetings, that kind of thing. It would be based around, business English. It's something I've taught a little bit of over the years, but not extensively. But it's, people who, it's a type of English for specific purposes because, the students know what they need. So normally they bring with them, what they need. Certainly if they're working in business. But obviously I don't think it is just something monolithic. I think it's very much in tune to what that particular learner or a group of learners need in that particular organization or company. And that's where emergent language is important, because a course book is not going to it'll just give you generic language. And that can be a starting point and work as a springboard. But the emergent language is going to make it more specific to the learner's voice and the learner's actual needs.
Back to the emergent language. What is it? And of course, we know we just had the workshop about it.
Yeah.
But for those who were not with us, what is it? And how do you compare it to other let's say, teaching methods like dactyl approach and other ways?
Yeah, so I mean, as I said at the beginning, emergent language is language that arises naturally in the lesson because there's either a gap in the learner's knowledge and that becomes visible, and then the teacher works and supports and explores language to help the learners developmentally in that way. It's not really an approach, I wouldn't say. I'd say it's a feature of classroom discourse. So when learners are communicating meaningfully, quite naturally, opportunities will arise where we can work with language. So yeah, I wouldn't say it doesn't. You can't compare it with the lexical approach. In fact, the lexical approach is very compatible with emergent language because the kind of language that you might deal with, might be informed by collocations or lexical patterns that you want to draw attention to. Yeah. So it's obviously the term emergent language comes from dogma ELT, which has also been called Teaching Unplugged at a later stage. That was pioneered by Luke Meddings and Scott Thornbury, and the idea behind that is that technology they saw can get in the way of good teaching because good teaching is being responsive and reactive to the learners, and to be responsive and reactive, the lesson has to involve conversation with the learners. Yeah. So I think that's something to consider. So emergent language came out of dogma ELT, but the idea is that they believed in materials like teaching, where we should focus on having a conversation in class, and through that conversation, language will emerge that you then can be worked on that's useful to the learner. And we didn't talk about this today, but that language, if we think about task-based learning, I think Rod Ellis has said this. Language that the learners are curious in or is useful to them, or they see in some way as useful to them, it will make them more sensitized to that language, and hopefully more, it will encourage the learners to notice that language as well. But of course, with emergent language, it emerges, you might clarify it for the learners, but then you've got to, as a teacher, monitor that language and think about what you do with that language. You've got to think about then how you then recycle it, how you turn it into activities where the learners go away and practice it for homework and then bring it in the next day. And as I said earlier on, it's got to become part of your course. We might start with a syllabus, but the syllabus grows because the learners are going to have, any learning group is going to have lots of learning needs and that are not met by a generic syllabus, and learners have an internal syllabus, and we've got to respond to that internal syllabus. It's not only just following the generic syllabus. We've got to find ways in which we can respond to that internal syllabus.
Okay, there is a term which back in 2007 I was in my, I think, third year at university studying English. There was a term that I hated so much, which was lingua franca. I didn't like the name. The name didn't sound smooth. I don't know. Sometimes you see a person and you hate this person.
All right.
Before knowing anything about it. Or you love this person. I don't know. But later I started to understand how important it is. So the first question, what is it? And second question is, do you think that today, with AI, and we have instant translations, we have smart glasses that translates what you see or what you hear and then tells you, do you think we can still, or it's still as important, or as it used to be, like the way of communication, especially that you said something that, not only about English, but since we're talking about English, that English doesn't belong to you anymore. Yeah. So what is it? And the second thing is my question.
Okay, I might prompt him for the second question. So the first question is, so what is English as a lingua franca? So, over the years, we've realised that there's been a huge spread of English, and that's largely due, initially to do with colonisation, colonialism, basically. So English has spread and it's become a world language, and it's been looked at in lots of different ways. World Englishes, plural, because there's not just one English. There's, the idea of the inner circle. This is back in the 90s. Catrew was talking about the idea there was an inner speaker group, which are kind of, Australians, Brits, and, people from the USA and Australians, Irish people, all in this inner circle, which generally often might have English as a first language, and the outer circle, you've got people that use English and other languages, and then the outer circle is an emerging, expanding circle of people that are using English from different cultures, different backgrounds, different contexts, different language groups, but they use English as a lingua franca and English as a means to communicate. So internationally, there are more speakers of English than there are so-called native speakers of English. And the term native speaker isn't that helpful, because you might find that people might have more than one language. And what is a native speaker? Well, it's not a helpful term necessarily. This has been talked about for a very long time. And in the 1990s, Jennifer Jenkins at King's College London, where she was at the time, did her PhD research, and later lots more research into the term English as a lingua franca. And the idea of that is that, what it says is that that we shouldn't be stuck with standardized norms. We shouldn't just be British English isn't correct, American English isn't correct. It's not about what's correct. It's about what's emerging, different sense of emerging. Sort of when learners interact with each other, because they might, accommodate each other in order to understand each other better. They might perform lots of other strategies, paraphrasing. Lots of different strategies in order to facilitate communication. There might be lots of novelty in the language that they use in order to get their meaning across. But the idea is that it's about, it takes in ideas of intercultural communication and multilingualism, which is where we've kind of moved, thinking about language. So, certainly I would say, and the truth is, English does not belong to the so-called native speakers. It belongs to the world, for lots of historical reasons, but it does, and it's widely spoken. And then we have to respect that there are lots of different varieties of English, and there's not one monolithic correct English. That would be what I would have to say about that. I don't know what your second question was.
Second, that now a lot of people use translations, like instant translations or quick translations sometimes. Now they're talking about some kind of glasses that translates what the person says, and then try to see what to say and stuff like that. So for the time being, it's okay. What do you think?
Yeah, it's all going to be useful, isn't it, for people at different points? But where's the real communication in that? If you're spending your time translating something and thinking what you're going to say, it's going to slow down lots of elements of communication. There's always been instant interpretation, hasn't it? That's been the thing in the European Parliament, for example, all over the world, and politics and diplomacy. So those are not necessarily new things, but I think generally humans do want to communicate. They'll find a way, and whether that's through technology, fair play. But I think a lot of people still want to actually learn languages in order to communicate. The precision of people might not need to get to the higher levels, because you've got AI to polish your emails, you've got AI to help you with academic reports, let's say, or academic work that you're doing. So I think it'll change the kind of the way that people will need the language. But at the moment, I think what we should be focusing on is the creativity of humans, and looking for where we're going to take over and where we're going to fit into in the world where AI will do all the basic things for us. But where our creativity and so on and so forth is going to be important, I think, and that's what we'll see increasingly, hopefully.
So you said that AI can do everything, can do half of the task or stuff like that. So
I don't misquote me. I didn't say it can do half the task. I said it's going to start. AI will, and as we know, the jobs market, aside from English language teaching, a lot of jobs will not be necessary with AI, because AI will be able to do them. But then, what are humans going to do? And I think the same can be said for us as people that need language learners. That there's still going to be, you're going to have to learn a language to be able to interact with other people. Yeah, I suppose in a written format, you could definitely do things through AI and translation. But certainly it's not going to involve our higher order thinking skills. And I think one thing that does involve higher order thinking skills is creative thinking, and we do that often through language. Language mediates our thought, and doesn't matter what language you use, it still mediates your thought. So that's what we've got to really encourage the learners to language, because it's about what's happening in the mind of the learner as well, and about helping them develop complexity of thought and critical thinking skills, which are all very important for the world we live in at the moment.
So moving from learners to teachers, I remember in 2019 when we did the CELTA, we had an intensive course. We had to finish the course in 25 days. So we would teach one day and then observe the other day. And we literally slept 3 or 4 hours every night, including the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. We spent, most of the time we spent on the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Today, do you think CELTA and Delta, and you said that you're a trainer, CELTA and Delta. Do you think, I'm not going to say not important at all. I would say, do you think that today and in the future with the AI, do you think there's still be as important as they used to be? Today I can just I don't want to name, but there are a lot of AI websites. So, tell the level, the time, the topics, the grammar, the reading, and after 5 or 10 seconds, I have a full plan.
Mm. But I mean, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of lesson planning because that's how things are. The evidence is proved for things like CELTA and Delta. I don't see there being an issue at all with using AI for lesson planning. The problem is.
No. I did not say there was a problem with using AI.
Yeah. No. On CELTA courses, I think you can use AI on CELTA courses. But that's the thing. The CELTA course or the Delta course, for example, they're teacher development courses. Well, the Delta's a teacher development course, and the other one's an initial training course. So there are things that AI can't do for you. It can't tell you about how to do classroom interaction. It can't let you experience that classroom interaction. So you have to have a go at teaching. A lot of, I'll probably get shot down for this, but there's a lot of programs around the world where they still take an old-fashioned applied science model to teacher education, where they'll tell you about the theories and in lectures and seminars, but then you don't actually do any teaching. So, but as we know, as teachers, as a teacher, I don't know how I could have learned about teaching without actually doing some teaching. So these courses allow you to encourage you to do some teaching, and then you reflect on their teaching. They're flawed. All courses are flawed. I think it's something we have to live with, unfortunately. But I think AI can certainly be used ethically as part of these courses. I don't think it's going to replace them at all, because people still need to know all the other stuff that you learn on these courses. And I think, you learn a lot of transferable skills that you can use in other training content. I wouldn't claim to
which is a business English term, transferable skills.
And in education, it's in general, I think transferable skills are really important. And, I trained as an English teacher, and then I became a teacher trainer, but a lot of the activities and ways of doing I took from teaching and I put them into training, and then from training, I've done all sorts of training that's, not just for English teachers, it's for sociology teachers recently at a university in the UK. So I think there's a lot of transferable things you learn about teaching that are just useful, good practice. And I'm choosing the word good practice, not best practice, because there isn't a best practice. It's good practice for the context that you're in. I think one of the criticisms of CELTA, it's very generic, and it doesn't suit all contexts. But again, it does give you an opportunity to, if you're a new teacher, to experience what it's like to actually interact with some learners and to try and teach them some language, or help them with their language needs. That's where the emergent language comes in again. It's not a criterion on either of the courses. It comes into one of the criterion on Delta, emergent language, but they don't name it specifically. But, it's, as I said earlier on, it's quite a natural thing that we do when learners are trying to say something. You help them say it. It's what we do when we learn languages in general. You come to a point where you're stuck. Help me, as we're in the conversation, and then you provide some support and hopefully a bit of scaffolding if you've got some patience. And then I might try to regulate that and say it myself. Yeah.
It depends on the part of the day.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's probably an important thing to think about with these training courses. And they're standardized, but they're different. There's not just one CELTA course, and I think they probably vary in quality a lot. I know for a fact the courses that I've worked on are very well considered, not just the ones that I've run myself, but my colleagues have been main course tutors and designers of, are all very different and are very well considered and thought out in terms of helping teachers develop. And I'd say the same about Delta courses as well. There are lots of issues with Delta because it can be quite challenging, and it can be there's a lot, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops. But within that, very few people get a short, intensive chance to look at their teaching and reflect on it. So I think that I don't see AI taking those over, because and AI being able to churn out a lesson plan doesn't make you a better teacher, because you've still got to interpret, you've still got to execute the plan. Without any training, you can't do that. Yeah.
Well, language learning and teaching, and I quote, that's why I'm reading when I was watching you and Danny in IATEFL, is learning and teaching, or language learning and teaching, is complex. Today there are many people who just take up teaching because they feel bored. There is an idea of native speakerism, which we all know. We meet with many people, they say, okay, your English is good, your Spanish is good. How long have you lived in UK, United States? Spanish, how long have you lived in Spain? And when they say, we've never been to Spain, we've never been to England, I say, how comes? Those people who just teach only because they're native speakers, or because they just feel bored, without any training or anything. What do you think their success rate is? Do you think they can be successful?
No, I don't think so. I think just because you're a native and so-called native speaker, as I said before, I think it's a very helpful term, that one. It's just because you're a so-called native speaker doesn't make you a better teacher at all. In fact, it can make you very insensitive to the process of learning. So I would say, what we've watched before is, where teachers will, native speaker teachers will just teach all this complex idiomatic language that's really not helpful for learners. I'd say, I'd trust the teacher who's gone through the process of learning the language themselves and has some empathy towards the learners, more than the kind of teacher that you described. And I don't think, being bored is ever a good reason to become a teacher. I just don't think you should, do something else. It's not that the money's great anyway. So do something else. That's what I'd say. So I don't think that they would be successful. No.
You like football?
Not really. No. Not much of a fan.
You killed my next question.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But you know Pep Guardiola?
No.
You don't know him?
No.
Are you serious?
Who?
Pep Guardiola.
No idea.
Well, he led Manchester City to the Champions League.
Yeah, I don't like football. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's... Anyway.
I had a season ticket for Aston Villa for 10 years when I was a kid. And it put me off football, quite frankly.
Well, actually...
although they've just done really well this year,
The only team I support in the Premier League is Aston Villa.
Yeah, really? Yeah.
I'm a Napoli fan, but in every country there is one team that I support. So, yeah. Anyway, he's a famous... he was the one who found Lionel Messi.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Oh, perfect. Thanks to Guardiola. So he said that, the teachers should be paid much higher than footballers.
Did he? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you agree with him? Not because
absolutely, yeah. But I mean, it's a completely different thing, isn't it? I mean, it's never going to happen.
I don't know. I've never been a professional footballer. I mean, physically, I'd love to.
Likewise, yeah. But no, I mean, I think we should be paid a lot more. I think, unfortunately, education isn't given, the importance that it should get, and that's a real travesty, because at the end of the day, education's key for society. It's key for I'm not talking about language teaching. I'm talking, all education. And it should be free. And people should have opportunity. And it should be varied, and it should be funded properly. And unfortunately, under successive, neoliberal governments, certainly in my country, it's become, there's been lots and lots of cuts to education. So I think that's certainly. An issue, but I think teachers should be paid more, and there should be more resources, because at the end of the day, we're educating the next generation who's hopefully going to sort out the mess that this world is in.
Is there a country where you felt that education was somehow given enough respect or more respect and appreciation than other countries?
I wouldn't be able to say. I think, each context has got its own challenges, and it's got, this is an important thing, that we haven't talked about, but it's about appropriate methodology. I'm talking about emergent language, but it's not going to be appropriate for all classrooms. And, only the teacher will know what's appropriate for their classroom. And I think that's the same for the answer for the question as well. It really, it varies depending on the context. There's always going to be challenges because, education is complex, and it's puzzles that we need to keep working on in order to progress.
And that's why we have these podcasts. We try to somehow, just scratch the surface maybe one day. In Mongolia, was the weather the worst thing, or
it's cold?
Everything else, the people
were lovely, and the teachers were lovely. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's cold.
Any upcoming trips, business trips?
This year, I think I'm going to Malta later in the year to speak at a conference, but I haven't got anything else planned. I'm pretty busy at the moment, so it's been very nice to be here in Germany and to be, with all the teachers here, hearing their ideas, and it's great. Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah, so we're very happy to have you here with us. So thank you for the podcast and thank you for the workshop.
Cheers.
So, Richard Chinn today, our guest and our, trainer during the workshop or the emergent language. Thank you very much for being here. So, we're going to watch the podcast in two versions, video and audio version on Melta Podcast website or YouTube channel, and on my own channel. So thank you very much, and hope to meet you again with another guest. Thank you very much.